both did Berlin and you got me there, good and proper. We both did London, got me there. Are you confident in making it 3-0 to Philly? Welcome back to episode 4 in my Shoe Chat Sundays series. Today we are talking all things running shoe rotation, and I have a very special guest, everybody's favorite pro runner, Phily Bowden, who is currently training for the Chicago Marathon, where she aims to beat her personal best of 2:25. But before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about running shoe rotation. What is it? Why is it important? And what can we learn from pro runners like Phily and apply to our own personal running shoe rotations? So in recent years, there's been a massive influx of new runners in the running scene, whether that be through the run club scene or people just going along to their local athletics clubs to get more involved. I've been along to a few myself, and I have witnessed the thousands of new runners that are getting into the sport, which I think is brilliant. And it just means that it's forever growing. It's harder and harder to get into races. But what I have observed is some newer runners don't necessarily know what they should be running in, for example, for their easy runs or for their track sessions. I've been along to run clubs where people are wearing the latest carbon running shoes for their easy mileage, or it might be their first time on the track and they're using a maybe more max cushioned daily trainer that isn't quite offering the stability that they need for their speed work. So today's video hopefully will help educate both new runners and more experienced runners on what shoes they can be using for different activities and the importance of picking the right shoe in your training throughout your running week. So the first topic to discuss is, what is a running shoe rotation and why is it important? So in its simplest terms, it simply means rotating between multiple pairs of running shoes across your running week. For most runners, that will be 2, maybe 3 pairs of running shoes. I actually put out a poll on my Instagram to find out how many shoes people are running in. So according to my viewers, around 36% of runners are using 3 pairs of running shoes. Close second was 2 pairs. Some lucky runners, 18%, are using over 4 pairs of running shoes in their rotation. So somewhere between 2 and 4 seems to be roughly where runners are sitting in terms of their rotations. So different pairs of running shoes have different characteristics based on what they're designed for in terms of the type of run. So I've identified 4 categories, and I've built some shoe rotations to share with you in terms of giving some examples. So we have the daily running shoes. These are more reliable, comfortable, durable, and they also tend to be a little bit cheaper. They're your everyday shoe that you're going to be using for around 80% of your running. You've got your speed work shoes. These are shoes for your intervals, your tempos, where you want something that's a little bit lighter, something a little bit more responsive. You may look for a shoe with a plate in it, whether that be nylon or carbon. Then you've got race day. You're looking for a shoe with probably carbon fiber plate for most people. They're highly responsive in terms of their foams that they use, and they're the most efficient shoes in terms of your running economy. So they're going to get the best out of you on race day. And the fourth and final category, I think, that sort of slipped in the last few years is the long run shoe, a more maximal protective shoe that's going to get you through those long runs at the weekend where you say you've got 20, 25 miles out there on the roads where you're pounding the tarmac for 2, maybe even 3 hours, and you need that extra cushioning for protection. I'm going to go on to some of my picks. I'm going to go through a 2 shoe running shoe rotation, a 3 and a 4. If I was going to go for any 2 shoes at the moment, I would pick the Adidas Evo SL for all my easy runs, some steady runs, even can do long runs in this shoe. And that would be my first pick. And the second shoe I would pick would be the Saucony Endorphin Speed 5, which is a great shoe when it comes to picking up the pace. So I could do my intervals, I could race in this shoe, and only use 2 pairs of running shoes across my week. If I was looking at building a 3 shoe rotation, I may want to consider something a little bit faster than a Saucony Endorphin Speed for, say, race day. Now this is where things do get a little bit expensive. You've got your carbon fiber running shoes that you want to be saving for those sessions in your training where you're running at race pace, and also for race day. So this is one of my favorites at the moment, the Fast R3 from Puma, probably one of the most efficient running shoes on the market, and I've certainly found that from my testing. When it comes to race day, you want to be putting on something that is going to give you as much as possible in terms of efficiency. So that would be my third shoe to add to the rotation. And if I was going for a 4 running shoe rotation, I would go for the Asics Superblast 2, which I would then use for my long runs. So they're my picks. We're going to hear from Phily in just a minute about her picks. But before we do that, why is a running shoe rotation so important? Now, I think there are 3 reasons why you should consider maybe purchasing that second or third pair of running shoes if you're somebody who runs in just one pair. And the first reason is for injury risk. Different running shoes will load your biomechanics in a slightly different way. So if you're rotating between multiple different pairs of shoes in your training weeks, you're going to be loading your body a little bit different. So for example, if you're using just one shoe that's causing your knee maybe to land in an awkward position over the course of your running week, if you continue to use that shoe, then you may face some sort of like repetitive straining injury. Whereas if you had multiple shoes in your rotation that are going to work different muscles, then you may not have those sort of more repetitive injuries crop up. Another reason to consider having a running shoe rotation is you can optimize performance. As I was saying, there are different running shoes for different runs. You want to be wearing something that's more focused to speed on speed days. For example, the Saucony Endorphin Speed has a nylon plate, which will just help offer you a little bit of stability and also propulsion that maybe something like a daily trainer wouldn't be able to offer you. You also want to be picking a shoe that's fun to run in. I think this is something that's maybe a little bit underrated when it comes to talking about shoe rotation, is it can actually improve your enjoyment of your runs. If you're putting on a carbon shoe for an interval session, you're going to feel a lot better than, say, if you were to do it in a daily trainer. So I think having a couple of pairs of running shoes can not only reduce your injury risk, it can also make your running a lot more enjoyable. And the third reason that I would consider having a shoe rotation is it can extend the life of your running shoes. So if you're cycling between 3 across the course of a week, then you're not putting all the mileage into one shoe. So in theory, your shoes will wear down less and you won't have to buy them as frequently. Over on Instagram, I also asked my followers, do you train in carbon shoes? Because I feel like a few years ago, it was almost forbidden to train in carbon shoes, whereas now you're seeing a lot more professional runners and runners like myself using carbon in their training. So 38% of people said yes, they use carbon at least once per week. 30% of people said yes, but only very occasionally. And then 19% of people said no, they save them for race day. And then the other 14% said no, I prefer to train in nylon/tempo day shoes. So that to me shows that more people are using carbon shoes in their training, but are we using them too much? That's something I'll be speaking to Phily about. I also asked my audience, how many pairs of running shoes do you think she runs in across her week? 49% of you said 4+, which was the highest category I gave, and only 15% of people said 2, which is interesting. Quick little tea break. Lovely. If you've been enjoying the Shoe Chat Sundays series so far, then please consider purchasing your running shoes from the partners of this series, which are ProDirect Running. Now, ProDirect have all the latest running shoes from all the brands in all the colorways, so they really are the best place to purchase your running shoes. They support the channel by providing samples for review and allow me to share my unbiased opinion on the latest and greatest from each brand. I can say what I like, what I don't like, without being tied in to one brand. Now, ProDirect currently have a deal on that if you buy 2 pairs of running shoes, you can get 10% off. And if you buy 3 pairs of running shoes, you can get 15% off, which is great if you're looking to completely revamp your shoe rotation. And yeah, a special thanks for ProDirect for their continued support on the Shoe Chat Sundays episodes. Next up, we have a very special guest joining us, none other than Phily Bowden. Very thankful for her time. Phily is somebody that I've known for a number of years, way back from when she started her YouTube channel, and it's been great to see all of the success that she's had over the years. And more recently, she's been working alongside brand On Running. So we talk a lot about On Running shoes, obviously, in her running shoe rotation. But I think a lot of things came up in conversation that can teach more beginner runners and more recreational runners on how to use running shoes. So without further ado, let's speak with Phily Bowden.
Hello.
Hello, how you doing?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Thanks for coming on Shoe Chat Sundays. Appreciate your time. You just finished your first run of the day?
Just a single run today. Yeah, so I got out a little bit late for out here. Like I ran at like 9 a.m, which is really late for the summer heat out here. But this is just a nice little interval in my gym session.
Nice. And how's training going so far? I think we're about 7 weeks to go until Chicago.
Yeah, it's going. It's getting there. It's been a rocky start to, I suppose, the training camp.
Yeah.
I guess, obviously you're on the same timeline. Like I started the block a little bit before I came out here. We came out here about a month ago now. And then when I got out here, it was just kind of putting out fires. Managed to get COVID, fell over, couldn't run for a bit, on and off. But back on the horse now, and yeah, just looking ahead to the work we can get done over the next 7 weeks and 1 day.
Yeah. It's at that period in the training block where there's still there's loads of time, but there's also not a lot of time. Because if you think about, you've got like a 2-week taper, so we've got kind of like 5 weeks of time to really build the fitness in the next few weeks. You can kind of put the other little things behind us, like I've had a few niggles and stuff that have cropped up. This week was a bit of a shocker of a week for me in terms of training. I've just felt really, really tired. Just a bit of like accumulative fatigue from like the big sessions are starting to kick in. I've built mileage back up to a place where I haven't been in a little while. So this week I was like hoping just to maintain the volume that I did in the last few weeks, but my body has just been cooked.
Feeling it.
Yeah, so I've had to dial things back a little bit, roll with the punches.
You're lucky if you don't feel like that at some point in a marathon block, and I guess if you don't get there, then you also don't know kind of where that line is. So yeah, you're probably in a good spot. It just doesn't feel great.
Yeah, and there's still plenty of time.
That's what I'm channeling as well.
Week by week, we'll get there. But yeah, thanks for jumping on the call. Today we are talking all things running shoes and shoe rotations, and I basically wanted to invite a pro runner on to the episode to try and understand how you use running shoes, and hopefully we can take some learnings from how pros use them to then apply to more like everyday recreational runners, because there's a lot of talk around running shoes and rotation and when to use carbon fiber shoes and what should they be using for their daily. So I thought it would be great to get you on, bit of an excuse to just have a chat about running shoes. Maybe not your favorite topic.
Do you know what? I've always been into my shoes, but I've never sort of really ventured there sort of in the content kind of space.
Yeah.
Going back years, I would mess around kind of too much in terms of like trying out new shoes and getting sort of distracted by the next new thing and wanting to try a little bit of everything. So no, this is up my alley. I'm just not sort of, I suppose, on the geek out level of being able to like recite the drop and all of the specs. And
yeah, I must admit, I'm one of those people that I can look at a new shoe that's coming out and I'll just read the specs and I'll have memorized them for eternity. I don't know why. I've got so much useful knowledge.
It's a very niche skill.
Yeah. First thing I wanted to discuss with you is what's it like being sponsored by On? How does that work in terms of your running shoes? Obviously, you can only run in On running shoes, but do you get sent shoes or do you get to choose shoes? And when does that sort of happen in terms of your marathon block and your training cycle?
Yeah, so I've been with On for just over a year now, and when I first signed with them, and I think like hearing from friends that with other brands, it's pretty typical that you'll kind of get sent almost each shoe that they do because they want you to be able to try them out and figure out what works for you, because you can read all of the specs and compare to what you've been wearing before and try and sort of find on paper what you think works for you, but it's about getting the shoes on your feet and trying them on. So yeah, I got like a crazy amount of shoes when I first signed with them in terms of like lots of shoes that maybe I don't even use because I tried them out and they weren't for me. Like they do shoes for wide fit feet, kind of more cushioned, less cushioned, and it's kind of like kissing a lot of frogs basically to narrow it down to what you want to wear. And then from there I kind of have my staples, and I'd say I have a smaller shoe rotation than other runners. I know some runners that really sort of change up their easy run shoes, and I'm a bit of a creature of habit. I find my shoe that I like and I sort of lock in with it. So I just then sort of communicate to them the shoes that I'm enjoying wearing, the shoes that I want, and I keep topped up, kind of let them know when I'm running low. And I always make sure I sort of have like a couple of shoes in reserve, fresh in the box, which is, you know, one of the biggest benefits, I suppose, of having someone being able to sort out all of your shoes for you. Is you've never kind of got to think about that. Just kind of got to send a polite email and have them dropped off. Which is helpful coming out here as well, because we come out here for long training stints. I'm up in Flagstaff at the moment, and bringing out enough shoes for a training block is a lot of your luggage weight when you sort of put them all in the suitcase. So they'll send some shoes out here for me as well, which is great. And yeah, I've sort of settled into a pretty solid rotation now. There's a couple of shoes that I sort of date, if you like, have a little bit of a flirty relationship with, but they're not in my week to week. And yeah, I think that's another luxury of being able to try a whole suite of shoes from a brand, is that you can kind of do that without kind of the expense of, you know, shoes are expensive, and if there's a shoe that you maybe wear once or twice a month, it's probably not worth investing in. But yeah, we get the luxury of that, which is pretty cool.
And in terms of like your training, obviously in a week of running, you'll probably be doing somewhere between 80 to 100 miles, which is a lot of running. So I presume you need a lot of running shoes. And On as a company have probably got maybe 20 different pairs of running shoes. But how many would you typically be using in a week's worth of training?
Yeah, I'd say at home it's a little bit different, because I, like out here, for example, one of the things that I sacrifice in my luggage is I don't bring everything with me, and I don't feel the need to ask them to send those shoes that I only wear, you know, pretty infrequently, because it just doesn't feel necessary, and I don't want to be, I don't know, wasteful with them. But back home I'll have sort of my gym shoe. I actually was racking my brains trying to remember what it's called, but I can't remember what it is. I'll have to send it to you afterwards. It's a very sort of like the flattest, kind of firmest shoe you can get, and I'll only wear that in the gym. And then my easy shoes, always at the moment, the Cloud Eclipse that I just run all of my easy miles in. And then at home I'll occasionally put on the Cloud Monster Hyper for when I just feel like I want a little bit extra energy return. That's one of the shoes that I don't bring out here, because I just don't wear it all that often. It'll be maybe every 2 or 3 long runs that I fancy sort of putting that on. So then that's 3 shoes, I guess, when I'm at home. And then I'll rotate between a couple of different pairs of flats. I suppose 3 pairs of flats, really. I'm trying to like think in my head, like my like little shoe rack I've got at home. So there's probably, the most shoes I would use in an average week would be 7, but out here it's more like 3.
That is pretty like minimalist, I guess, for somebody who has the option of using loads of different running shoes. To only use 3 is pretty interesting. From listening to your video on the current shoes that you run in, that you posted on your channel, you were saying that once you find a shoe, you kind of stick with it. And is that more because just for preference, or is it an injury thing, a performance thing?
I think it's a bit of both. I like finding a shoe that I can trust and just kind of know that I'm going to go out the door. For me, especially with an easy run shoe, you just want to be going out and not thinking about the shoe that you're wearing. You don't want it to be something that you're consciously kind of spending time thinking about, because for me, that's either like, oh, is this shoe quite right, or does this feel okay today? I want to kind of just put them on and be like, yep, this feels good, out the door and go. And I think when you mess around a little bit too much with adding in lots of different shoes perhaps at the same time, or wearing lots of different pairs of shoes within your rotation, for me anyway, that's when, if you get a niggle come up or you get injured, it's hard to then kind of look at your training life, I suppose, as a bit of an experiment and say, what's caused this? Because if there's lots of shoes kind of entering the chat, then it could be one of them. It also could just be something completely unrelated. You need to, do some strength work in the gym. But I like to kind of keep the variables low so that I'm not kind of stressing myself out with that.
That makes a lot of sense. I would say I'm kind of like an anomaly when it comes to running shoes, obviously getting to test like almost hundreds of different pairs across the course of a year. And sometimes when I'm like testing new shoes, I do find that I pick up little niggles, or they load my legs a little bit differently to how my typical running shoes would would load my biomechanics. So I often find myself, like when I go through those periods and I find, oh, that I've run a lot in that shoe this week, but I'm feeling like my quads are really sore. I'll often go back to a running shoe that's like not as sexy as the new ones that have just come out, but is more of like a staple. Like for me, it just happens to be this shoe which is an On running shoe, which is the Cloud Monster. I think this is the 2, but I was a big fan of the first one. And that's kind of my shoe when I feel like I've got a niggle or I'm feeling tired or I want to wear a shoe that I know is not going to cause me any issues. Then I go back to a Cloud Monster. But you talked a little bit about the Cloud Eclipse. I've managed to dig that one out here as well. So this is the shoe that you use for most of your daily training, is that right?
Pretty much all my easy runs, yeah. All of my warm-ups, all my cool-downs. With the exception of, I suppose, if I'm doing sort of a long run progression, sometimes I might be in the shoe that I'm going to do the progression in from the get-go, but a lot of the times, even if I've got sort of like a long warm-up, I'll put the Eclipse on for 7 or 8 miles and then switch into the carbons because it's always nice to kind of feel the difference. But yeah, that's my go-to and my daily. And I suppose coming back to what you were saying about you being an anomaly, wearing lots of different easy shoes, you've probably got really good conditioning from that if you're doing it all of the time in terms of like your feet and your legs kind of having to get used to like lots of different shoes. But I suppose the other thing is being with just one brand, there's probably going to be one shoe that is kind of favours your running style or kind of your foot strike. Whereas if you can be, I suppose, brand agnostic, you can effectively find that shoe, or, you know, some brands might have 2 of that shoe that kind of complement your running style kind of across the board. So it's not to say to people like don't kind of have a shoe rotation and mess around and try lots of different pairs of shoes. I would just say like maybe don't have shoes that are kind of like spanning the whole spectrum of like who they're made for is sort of like a stability shoe, a minimalist shoe, you know, a maximal sort of support shoe. I think that's where it kind of maybe gets a little bit confusing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The next thing I was going to ask you about is what is your take on carbon shoes and when do you use them? And you suggested that you use them in your training week. What sort of running do you do in them? Is it just simply the tempos, the intervals, the faster stuff? Is there any situations where you'd be wearing a carbon shoe on an easy run day?
Yeah, I'd never wear carbons on an easy day. It's pretty much all of my session days. So any days that I'm not running easy, or even, I suppose, any parts of the day that I'm not running easy. So for example, on a Monday, I'll tend to have a longer run in the morning and then a short double in the afternoon, and then I'll put my carbons on for strides. It doesn't have to be carbons, but it's nice to just change into a pair of flats that are a little bit more aggressive, are lending themselves to you being more on your toes and running faster and putting them on for strides. And then my session days tend to be Tuesdays and Fridays, and so whether I'm doing a track session or tempo, a steady state, any kind of intervals, I'll always be putting my carbons on. And they're the shoe that I wear for the marathon, so the same as you've got there. I've got my carbon strike here. These are a fresh pair that aren't dirty. But I am wearing them more often than I used to. I know in the past I would try and sort of pick one of those days to wear my carbons, you know, look at my 2 sessions and then pick a flat, kind of an old school flat, if you like, that doesn't have carbon in, and wear those on the other day, just to sort of like challenge my calves a little bit and not kind of get the benefit of the carbon. But I think as my mileage has gone up and the training has just kind of escalated, I've started wearing carbons more to get the kind of help in the session, and I've not really seen any negative in terms of, from the knees down, like any niggles or anything cropping up, or at least any of the niggles that I've had haven't really been linked to the shoes I've been wearing. So I think there is a little bit of chat around that, and I think it really varies, and a lot of the relationship between if you're wearing carbons too much and potentially getting injured comes down to like going into them too quickly or ramping up how often you're wearing them like way too quickly, but also not taking into account kind of like your running style and whether, you know, the carbons are actually kind of built for the way that you run, because I think sometimes that can be yeah, a little bit of an injury risk for some people. But yeah, I've been fine in them.
I think what I can take from that is it's really important to like use the carbon shoes in your training week when they're needed. So it's important to use them when you're at the track doing your intervals, you're doing your tempo. You're not using them like every day just because they simply feel the best shoe. You wouldn't go out on the, I don't know, for a 10-mile easy run in the morning and think, oh, my legs are tired today, I'm just going to stick on the carbons.
I've never done that.
No.
I know some people do it and they sort of see it as a treat, but to be honest, I don't know, I think I'd probably put them on and it would cause me to run too fast.
Yeah.
Because you put them on and they, it just makes you pick it up. That association is there that I wear them in sessions, but also that's what they're built for. So I'd rather, slog around an easy run in my easy day shoe and use it for what it's there for and recover, and then save the fast shoes for when I'm actually going to be remotely fast.
Yeah. Because I think a lot of people forget that like running shoes are like a tool for your training, and they all are designed with different features and have different purposes for each run. So you talked about your Cloud Eclipse. That's perfect in terms of having lots of cushioning. It's going to protect your legs on the daily miles, but it's not going to give you the propulsion that you need for your track workout. So that's where your carbon plated shoes would come in. I've got a Shoe Chat Sundays broadcast, and I said that nice. I was having you on and we're going to be talking about running shoes. So I've got a few questions from the viewers. The most liked one in the thread is from Badaboom423. He says, do you ever get FOMO being sponsored by On and not being able to try all the new shoes from other brands?
I think I wouldn't call it FOMO. It's always a little bit of an unknown. And I think these days there's a lot less of that because, you had the first super shoe come out, and I suspect athletes that weren't with Nike when that happened probably had a lot of FOMO because they definitively couldn't access something that other athletes had. Now I think the landscape is far different, and to be honest, I don't think there's much in it with the racing shoes. That's what it comes down to. Every brand out there has got a decent road racing shoe, and the difference from one to another is probably very minimal. And as someone that finds a shoe that I like and likes to stick in it, I think you then sort of build a relationship with the brand that is supporting you. And so it's not sort of really, I don't know, I personally don't sort of think, oh, the grass could be greener somewhere else. It's more sort of, I've got my shoes here, I'm sort of looking at the shoes I've got next to me. Like I've got my team, I'm good sort of thing. And you find what works for you and I feel looked after. So
Definitely. I think it's a fair point as well that you made. Like when Nike came out with the Vaporfly, I think it was in like 2019, there was definitely a point where if you weren't a Nike athlete, you were at a disadvantage on the start line. But now in like 2025, like all the brands have great options, not just for race day, but like the daily trainers have all really improved. Everybody's got like a max cushion shoe that you can use for your days when you're feeling a little bit tired, which you said is the Cloud Monster Hyper. So I think you're dead right in saying that, like, yes, it would be fun maybe to test all the different shoes, but you're not missing out in terms of using those shoes as tools for your training. So that makes a lot of sense. Next question is, what is your current shoe rotation if you could only choose 3? So in terms of your On shoes that you have at hand,
easy.
What are the 3 that you would use?
So I've got the Cloud Eclipse here, which is my go-to easy shoe. I've brought it out, it's not going in this shoe rotation, so I'm kind of going off a tangent here, but I have been sent the Cloud Surfer Max, which is effectively the Eclipse that's been sort of updated and given a new name, which I haven't tried out yet because I'm just a bit of a stickler for sticking with what I know during a marathon block, but it's there and it's tempting me, so I might put it on for one of my doubles at some point and just see whether it feels any different and whether I like the updates or if I want to stick with the regular Cloud Eclipse for the rest of the block. So that's my number one, and that's what I'm doing, I suppose, probably like 75% of my volume for the weekend. And then it's my race shoe, which is the Cloud Boom Strike that I use for like pretty much all of my intervals. And I say all of them, that's I suppose where the third shoe comes in. Like I could probably just leave it at 2. I don't think I've worn another shoe to run in the last week.
Yeah.
But I do have with me another flat that I sometimes throw on, which is called the Cloudboom 4, and it's actually not available on the website. So I'm kind of teasing you guys by showing you something that they only send out to the pros. But it's, I suppose, somewhere between the old Echo Boom flat and the Cloudboom Strike. It's, I'd say, probably a little bit less aggressive than the Cloudboom Strike, and sometimes I just put it on just to feel a different shoe for those intervals. Another one that I brought with me that I suppose would probably be a toss-up. They sent these out to me out here, so that's why those ones have been thrown in that sort of trio. But the other one, if you are looking for like a slightly different flat, and I know a lot of the OAC guys use, is the Cloudboom Zone. And that's effectively, it's kind of an old school flat because it doesn't have a carbon plate, but it's got, I think it's a P-Bax plate in there. So it just makes you kind of work a little bit harder for the return, but it's still a very aggressive, very fast, sort of fairly minimal flat. Yeah, that's sort of
George Mills,
3.5, I guess.
George Mills threshold shoe, that one, isn't it?
Yeah, and they don't train, I don't think they train in carbons very much at all. And I mean, I know they're, more of a middle distance squad, so the mileage is, I mean, it's probably not much lower, to be honest. They eat up the mileage.
Yeah.
But I know that they use that for pretty much all of their workouts. So.
Oh, this is an interesting one from Falapa Paolo. He says, how do you help On with prototypes and testing?
So there's loads of different ways that On get the athletes involved. Actually, we've got an app where they can send out new versions of shoes, and you can opt in to be one of the testers for those shoes. So I think I got sent pretty much like the next iteration of the Cloud Monster fairly recently, and you get kind of sent some instructions where it's like you sort of have to fill out a questionnaire at sort of like the start, a certain amount of mileage in, and then when you return them, and they just are effectively asking for our feedback, and that's kind of road testing the shoe at home. I know that they've invited other athletes into the labs to test out new shoes on the treadmills. I haven't done that, but I was able to try on effectively the next version of the Cloudboom Strike last time that I was over at the head offices in Zurich, which was really cool because they kind of gave me this shoe and said, this isn't going to be the final version, but this is where we're at the moment. Try it on, let us know what you think, give us some feedback. And so I was on what's called the development floor of the HQ, like a really cool place because you're basically surrounded by unreleased shoes. You're not allowed to take any pictures. And I tried these shoes on and was just running up and down behind everyone on their computers, testing them out and trying to give them some pointers. So that was really cool. I was able to have a little bit of a nosy at some of the other things on the shelves and look at the names and some casual shoes up there as well, which was really exciting. And then the other thing that I did on that same trip while I was over there was I went into what's called the maker space. And again, it's quite sort of hush-hush that we're not allowed to take our own photos and share videos of in there because they want to keep it a little bit secret, and it's for them to help their kind of like iteration process. But we did a workshop which is called Making Monsters, and you have access to basically every single element of a shoe, and you get to design and within the sort of hour and a half create your own shoe using the equipment and the tools they've got out there. So it's obviously not a fully functional shoe. It's quite a creative sort of abstract workshop, but you could have, I suppose, like a spike plate of an old On spike. You could use a light spray upper, and you're there sort of like using these like industrial machines to like glue them together, sew them together, and put our own sort of ideas on there.
That's crazy.
And that's like a creative space that they use to kind of get ideas rolling. And you can see on the shelves in the background some of the past sort of products that people have put together, and they call them the monsters because they do look a little bit janky and rough around the edges. But it's cool to think that as an athlete you can be a part of that then may feed into a shoe that actually meets the shops at some point.
But that's pretty fun that you got to see how like shoes are even made, let alone make your own one. So that sounds pretty cool. Did you even try? Did you try running in it at all, or was it
the shoe that I made? You physically wouldn't have been able to get your foot in because I'd used. I try and remember what the upper was. I think it was from like the old Echo Boom upper, and I'd kind of hole punched different size holes into the top, and then put a light spray upper underneath it and sprayed it black, so that it was almost this sort of like Dalmatian upper. And then I'd threaded some elastic through as like a pseudo lace, but you like physically couldn't get it on. High fashion, that was what I was going for.
Yeah, it
So,
sounds like a really
not
cool
practical.
shoe, just not very functional.
No, I think it had about 3 carbon plates in there and different like.
Why not?
bottom
Throw the
halves of
kitchen
shoes.
sink at it. Great. Well, to conclude our little chat, I was wondering, do you have any like running shoe advice that you would like to leave with us today that maybe we can take from, say, pro runners like yourself and apply to maybe somebody who's a beginner runner or just getting into running when it comes to building their own shoe rotation?
Yeah, I think my advice isn't going to be that snazzy, because I get this question quite a lot from people, and they're sort of asking me what shoe they should buy or what shoe they should run in from what I recommend. And I think the reason we have so many shoes out there is because we are all so different in what we like and what we also should be running in. So if you're starting from scratch or you're really unsure, I'd say the best thing to do is go to a running shop that stocks as many brands and shoes as you can and get on the treadmill, and someone there will help you look at your gait and try a bunch of shoes on and, you know, see what feels good. That's always a really great place to start. And I suppose learning from my days of messing around with lots of different pairs of shoes and gravitating towards maybe what looks cool or what I think I'd like to be wearing, don't complicate it. Like, if you find something that works, buy that shoe. Like, and if you're worried it's going to be discontinued, buy a few pairs before it does. Like, I think that there's a lot in that, and I think whilst it can be nice and exciting to sort of look elsewhere and try something different when something is working, you can often like kick yourself when that backfires. So I think like just don't complicate it. And yeah, I think whilst pro runners get access to like a lot of shoes, you know, I'm wearing like basically 2 or 3 pairs. So find what works for you.
I think that's the biggest takeaway I've got from chatting with you is just keep it simple. Don't overcomplicate things. Appreciate your time. The final question that I thought I would leave you with today is, do you know what shoe you'll be running Chicago in? And are you confident in making it 3-0 to Philly?
Well, first question, yes. I'm definitely going to be wearing the Cloudboom Strike, which is this little guy here. I think for most of the marathon runners at On, it's a toss-up between the Cloudboom Strike and the Light Spray. I'm a bit old school in that I like having my laces and being able to adjust them to how my feet are feeling. So that's been my go-to for the last couple of marathons, so it's going to stay the same for Chicago. And I guess we'll see. I'm not going to put any bets on it because I feel like you've got the bit between your teeth from 2-0 so far. Yeah, and we've been, I suppose, following each other around to the same marathons. You've maybe done a couple of extra ones in between, so perhaps you're at a disadvantage there.
Yeah, just for context, we both did Berlin and you got me there, good and proper. We both did London, got me there. So I've got a rematch.
I suppose
in
to be
Chicago.
fair, you could separate things in London and say that we weren't in the same race.
That's true.
Although I suppose that would only...
You're trying to scratch a point off. We can make it 1-0 if you want.
I mean, that would only be a benefit, I suppose, if you had beaten me.
Yeah.
You know, for me to claim that, like,
definitely.
you know, I was only in the elite women's race. But yeah, no, I remember coming past you in Berlin and feeling for you a little bit.
Yeah, that was a tough day. I don't know why I decided to race
come.
that marathon off the training and the injury that I had going into it, and especially running the way I did. But, you know, lessons learned. But yeah, really looking forward to the rest of the build. So I hope yours goes well and smoothly over in Flag. Are you planning to be up there
likewise.
for the whole time?
Yeah, pretty much. We are going to head out to Chicago a few days before the race. I think Wednesday or Thursday. So it will be a little bit different to the last couple of marathons because I've trained out here and then raced back in Europe and dropped down sort of 2.5 weeks to go in the taper. But I'll be tapering up here, which will be different.
Yeah.
I've done it before leading into Copenhagen. I tapered in St. Moritz while I was out there on a training camp. So I know that in terms of like, some people feel, you know, particularly swayed one way or the other if they come down from altitude like a few weeks before or a few days before. But no, I think it'll be good. And yeah, nice to tick off a new city, new major as well.
Yeah, really looking forward to it. Well, thanks again for your time and chatting running shoes for the last half an hour. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. No, thanks for having me.
Yeah, speak to you again soon.
Hopefully I'll see you out in Chicago, but after the race, not mid-race.
I'm going to be on your shoulder from the start. I'm just going to be running along, stick with Phily.
To be fair, if I see you during the race, it would be you coming past me, I reckon, because although they don't, we start at the same time, so
yeah,
same thing could happen, I suppose,
I
in
reckon
Berlin where you shoot off.
I'll start a little bit behind and probably go too fast at the beginning.
You're right. You're writing the story now.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks again. Speak to you soon.
See ya.
Bye. So that was a great conversation with Phily. I personally took a lot from that conversation myself. I think the biggest one for me is I presume that somebody who has access to 15, 20 different pairs of running shoes from the brand that sponsor them would use multiple pairs of running shoes across the week. But she said she likes to keep things fairly simple and just rotate between 2 or 3, those being the Cloud Eclipse for her daily mileage, occasionally the Cloud Monster Hyper when her legs are feeling a little bit tired or maybe she's going long with a bit of a pickup, and then finally when it comes to her intervals and race day, she uses the Cloud Boom Strike. A great conversation as always. Thank you to Phily for coming on. That wraps up today's episode of Shoe Chat Sundays, episode 4. Go check out the other episodes in the series where we had some great guests, including Aubrey from Bigger Than Running. We had the FOD runner last week and even had the GOAT of running shoes himself, Kofuzi, join us when it came to Tempo Day shoes. So I'd highly recommend checking out those videos in the playlist. Again, a big thanks to Product Running, who without them would not be able to put on these videos. And until next time, aspire to run to inspire, and we'll see you again soon.